Joining us now is Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, member, of course, of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday. It's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start with this. This is the language from Justice Alito, who wrote this opinion. He said, "We therefore hold that the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. Roe and Casey must be overruled, and the authority to regulate abortion must be returned to the people and their elected representatives." That was called by one columnist the greatest victory in the history of the conservative movement. It's certainly something that you have worked for a very long time, Senator.
Yeah, well, what it does, it takes us back to before 1973. Before 1973, the law of the land was that each state can decide the issue of life, when life begins, whether or not to have an abortion, what circumstances around having an abortion. All of us in the conservative world have believed that there's nothing in the Constitution giving the federal government the right to regulate abortion. There's nothing in the Constitution that creates a right to abortion as a constitutional principle. This was judge-made, out-of-cloth law. Now, what this court has done is taken us back to pre-1973, where each state can decide through their elected officials when life begins and how to treat life. And this is a huge victory for the pro-life movement. President Trump deserves a lion's share of credit here. He fought like a tiger to put 3 constitutional conservative judges on the court. He stood behind Kavanaugh. And all of us who've been working for the last 50 years to get this right, to have a constitutional reset, Friday was a glorious day.
Yeah, you know, I think of you fighting like a tiger, as you say, over Brett Kavanaugh's nomination process, which you thought had gone to, I think you used the word disgusting places in terms of what happened there. So what's it like for you personally, Senator, as you look at this? And we I think, have video of you giving that speech, and you sort of grabbed victory from the jaws of defeat.
Well, it's satisfying to know that through the constitutional process, you can make a difference. You know, when Roe came out, we didn't burn down the Capitol as conservatives. We didn't go to liberal justices' homes and try to intimidate them. The radical left are constitutional anarchists. They're literally trying to change this country from top to bottom. They want to pack the court because they don't like this decision. They want to abolish the Electoral College so California and New York can pick the president in perpetuity. At the end of the day, they want to federalize elections, take it away from the states to make sure you have ballot harvesting and do away with voter IDs. So these constitutional anarchists, here's my advice to you. Quit trying to burn down America and work like we did in the fields. Elect people who agree with you at the ballot box. Your next guest, one of your guests, is from Georgia. I'm dying to see what she will say about how she would handle as governor any effort to regulate abortion in her state. This was won through the ballot box by conservatives, and we're not going to let liberals intimidate the rule of law system to take it away from us.
Well, it certainly has lit a fire under politicians on Capitol Hill, and they're going to use this as an opportunity in the midterms. Here's Nancy Pelosi talking about how she viewed that decision on Friday. Watch.
A woman's right to choose reproductive freedom is on the ballot in November. We cannot allow them to take charge so that they can institute their goal, which is to criminalize reproductive freedom, to criminalize it.
To criminalize reproductive freedom. You've got very tight Senate races in Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, New Hampshire, Senator, and this will be, no doubt, a powerful line of debate.
Yeah, this would be one of the issues that we talk about when we elect senators and House members and members of the state houses and governors, but it's not going to change the 2022 outcome. Most Americans believe that I really do believe most Americans are be comfortable with elected officials making a decision about life. Let every state do it the way they would like. What's going to be on the ballot box is $5 gas. You can't walk down the street without being attacked. Crime is rampant. We have broken borders. But yeah, this is a big day for the pro-life movement. For all of you, I wish Henry Hyde were alive so he could see this. For all of you who've been working for 50 years to elect members of the House and the Senate and presidents that would put constitutional conservatives on the court, your day finally arrived. And to the left, the way you do this is to do what we did. You take it to the ballot box. You don't try to destroy America. These constitutional anarchists like AOC have to be dealt with, and there will be a backlash against this effort to intimidate our judges.
I want to read from Justice Thomas's concurrence. Shannon just mentioned this, and this is getting a lot of attention in terms of whether or not this decision leads to other decisions as well. He said in future cases, we should reconsider all of the court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell, which are same-sex marriage and contraception decisions. He said we have a duty to correct the error established in those precedents. That's going to send a chill through many moderate voters' minds across the country, Senator.
Well, I really respect Clarence Thomas. They tried to destroy him. Remember his confirmation process? They tried to destroy Kavanaugh. You know, Bush 41 stood by Clarence Thomas. President Trump stood by Kavanaugh, and here we are today. But Alito, I think, set the right tone. He said nothing in this decision puts those cases at risk. The reason he decided that Roe v. Wade was wrongly decided is because it deals with the potential for life. These other privacy issues like contraception do not deal with the potential for life. He made a distinction between same-sex marriage and contraception, which I think will win the day over time. One thing we're not talking about is Harry Reid. We wouldn't be here if Harry Reid had not changed the rules of the Senate, allowing a simple majority. Harry Reid believed they were going to have Democratic presidents forever. He took the rules of the Senate, he changed them, and those simple majority rules will lead to Trump getting 3 great conservatives on the court. And one thing we're not talking about is Justice Ginsburg, who is a mighty voice for the liberal cause. She chose not to retire. So it was an amazing series of events that allowed us to get here today. And at the state level, to my friends on the left, you're going to have a hell of a fight on your hands at the state level, at the ballot box, and that's where this should have been all along.
Well, yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of attention paid to state legislature elections in places where people might not have paid attention in the past. But your colleagues in the Senate, Joe Manchin, he's a pro-life Catholic. He's calling for legislation to codify Roe v. Wade. Murkowski Collins also doing the same. Bernie Sanders says we've got to end the filibuster and we must codify as law Roe and Casey. What do you say to them?
I don't think Joe Manchin's going to turn the Senate into the House. He may be disappointed in this decision. If you're pro-life, you should embrace this decision. It allows states to determine life, not 5 unelected judges. I don't see Susan Collins or Murkowski or pro-choice changing the rules of the Senate. The rules of the Senate would require 60 votes to enshrine Roe v. Wade. Unless you blow up the Senate, that's not going to happen anytime soon. As conservatives, you would need 62 votes. So here's what you have. You have a full assault on the Constitution by the left. They want to do away with the Electoral College. They want to expand the number of judges on the Supreme Court to pack it. And now they're pushing Bernie Sanders to change the rules of the Senate. The center will hold here. The Senate will not change. The 60-vote requirement for legislation will hold. But if you left it up to Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, they would blow the Senate up to get their way. All these people has want an outcome. The constitutional provisions restricting their ability to win, those be damned. We want to change America to get outcomes, and conservatives are going to fight, and we're going to uphold the Constitution. And I don't think Joe Manchin or Sinema or Murkowski or Collins are going to blow up the Senate because they're disappointed with this court ruling. I don't believe that. I pray they will not.
I want to end on this note because I know that this is something that you feel personally very passionate about with regard to life, and you have fought for heartbeat laws and pain laws throughout the course of your career. You spent a lot of time in the Senate, and so did now President Joe Biden. He's evolved dramatically. When I think about the things that he said on Friday about what a somber day Friday was, and then I want to play for everyone what he said in 2006 about this issue. Watch.
I do not view abortion as a choice and a right. I think it's always a tragedy, and I think that it should be rare and safe. And I think we should be focusing on how to limit the number of abortions, and they ought to be able to have a common ground and consensus as to do that.
Where did that Joe Biden go, Senator?
The radicalization of Joe Biden, the guy that ran and the guy that actually is president are two different people. He ran as a centrist. He's governing in the most radical way in any president, maybe in modern history. What happened is that the radical left has taken over the Democratic Party, and he is going where they're taking him. What do they want to do in light of this opinion? They want to change the makeup of the court, to pack it with additional judges so it will become liberal, not conservative. What do they want to do when it comes to elections? They want to federalize elections, take the power away from the states, institute ballot harvesting, and do away with voter IDs. They want to make D.C. and Puerto Rico a state. At the end of the day, their constitutional anarchists are in charge of the Democratic Party, and I appreciate President Biden saying to the left, don't use violence. What I worry about is this protest going unchecked at Judge's home is giving a green light that there are no rules anymore. If we don't watch it, somebody's going to get killed out here. And I'm urging Merrick Garland to start putting people in jail who show up at the justice's home to try and intimidate them and their family. If we don't reset here pretty soon, somebody's going to get killed. Do what we did. Go to the ballot box. Try to win elections. Don't burn down the country.
Well, the Attorney General certainly has the law in the books to do exactly that at judges' homes, at justices' homes. Senator, always good to see you. Thank you very much, Senator Lindsey Graham, for joining us today from Columbia, South Carolina.
Subscribe to the Fox News YouTube channel to catch our nightly opens, stories that are changing the world and changing your life. From Tucker Carlson tonight.